Chapter 111 Missed Before Long. The lecture teacher with high cheekbones boarded the semi-high wooden platform in front of the small auditorium, let go of his voice, and said, "Good morning, kind ladies. I'm Sai Via La Heda. Today I want to share with you the experience of arranging family expenses. This is divided into three parts. One is how to balance the expenses of food, housing, clothes, and hiring servants for families with an annual income of about £100, and the other is what expenses families with an annual income of £200 should increase to make themselves look more decent. Melissa listened carefully and remembered the combined annual income of her two brothers without mental calculation. It's over £200, she thought, half gratified and half frightened. She is happy and satisfied with her present life, and she is afraid that it will disappear in a blink of an eye this time. Selina with burgundy hair covered her mouth and lowered her voice to two friends. She seems to be a believer in the Lord of the Storm. She wears a storm badge. Melissa looked intently, and sure enough, she saw Mr. Sai Via's left chest wearing a badge depicting strong winds and waves. She hurriedly explained, "Mrs. Xiaodatai, who told me this lecture, is a believer in the Lord of the Storm." I think it is not surprising for the teacher. Well, I don't feel any problem. We're here to listen to the specific bill plan. Elizabeth comforted Melissa, but, except Melissa, we don't need and are not qualified to make family spending plans. Selina with burgundy hair muttered something. Elizabeth retorted without hesitation, "But we will get married eventually, and we will have our own family eventually." Selina has been afraid of Elizabeth since the magic mirror divination incident, so she has to nod her head and pretend to listen carefully. The lecture teacher, via law, raised his right hand and said, "The premise of all these spending plans is that we must respect the opinions of the male hosts, who are the source of income and the pillar of the family. They win everything for us in the turbid society for anxiety, pressure, trouble, and chaos. Therefore, we must create a peaceful environment that is not disturbed by external affairs so that they can relax after returning home, let their hearts be baptized and cope with various challenges in a better state." So, Mr. Liu Ermi, a famous philosopher, sociologist, humanist, and economist, once said that women are angels of the family. Selina, whole cheeks, outlined dimples, slightly excitedly asked in a low voice, "Liu Ermi, is that the gentleman who said, 'People are born free'?" "Yes, but he is a believer in the Lord of the Storm." Elizabeth hesitated to answer. At this moment, the lecture teacher, Via, continued, "Mr. Liu Ermi also told us that women are born with defects in wisdom and logic. In this case, we who have no judgment ability should accept the words of our father and husband as religious beliefs." Note 1. This description made Melissa, Selina, and Elizabeth speechless for a long time. "Shall we go?" Finally, Selina tentatively suggested. Melissa and Elizabeth nodded hard at the same time. "Okay." They took their gauze hats, bent down, and slipped toward the side door, trying to leave here without attracting others' attention. When they arrived outside carefully and stood up straight, they suddenly heard a burst of warm applause in the small auditorium. Melissa subconsciously looked back, looked through the doorway, and looked inside. She saw Mrs. Shaw applauding and ladies applauding. Oh, praise the goddess. Melissa spat out a sigh and walked away from this uncomfortable place with Selina and Elizabeth. "Shall we go to Harold's department store?" Standing under the roadside trees, Selina forgot what happened just now and suggested happily. Melissa was silent for a few seconds. "I want to go back to study. Learning." Selina brushed her burgundy hair dully, as if she had returned to her normal life. "And I have to buy bread, beef, potatoes, and fruit. Klein has to work today, and Benson has gone to the municipal library. I have to go back." Melissa suddenly felt that she loved textbooks, clockwork, and gears so much. Selina decided to keep her distance from Melissa, who was in an abnormal state today, and looked at Elizabeth sideways. "Please say with smile. The two of us go to Harold's department store? Although I've already spent all my private money, it is also beautiful to have a look around." Elizabeth agreed to her friend's proposal and asked casually, "Melissa, does your brother Klein have to work on Sunday?" "Yes, he is off on Monday, which is different from ordinary work." Melissa unconsciously raised her head slightly. After leaving Blackthorn's security company, Klein took a rail coach to Hal's block. He tried to collect his thoughts, no longer thinking about the treasure of Antigone family, and let his attention return to the matter of playing. It is very important to digest the potions and improve yourself as soon as possible, no matter when. Playing the soothsayer? Oh, I'm still not professional enough. The fortune teller in the big country has to turn over the Gregorian calendar in everything he does. Klein took the cane and sat in the interior of the carriage. He decided to predict in advance whether today is conducive to travel and going to the divination club. This is a qualified soothsayer. Taking advantage of the opportunity to get off the bus, Klein took out a half-penny copper coin, and his eyes were restrained. His eyes quickly deepened, and he silently meditated. Today is suitable for going to the divination club. Today is suitable for going to the divination club. When Klein popped the coin up, instead of watching it roll, he stretched out his palm flat, pop. Half a penny of copper coins fell and landed firmly in his palm. This time, the 1/2 number surrounded by wheat ears is facing up. The number is up, which shows that bad things will happen to the divination club today. Klein just thought about it and turned to the other side of the street, waiting for the bus to go to Daffodil Street. He felt more and more like a magic stick. Hal's block, in front of Harrods department store. Selina was about to enter when she suddenly froze and turned to the side. What happened? Elizabeth asked doubtfully. Selina drummed cheekway. Elizabeth, I thought of my occult teacher, Mr. Vincent, who passed away in this way, the morning after my birthday. Is this because I peeked and used his secret mantra? This has always made me feel guilty and uneasy. Moreover, during this time, I have always been unlucky. So, Elizabeth asked with tacit understanding. Selina bit lips way. I want to go to the nearby divination club to do divination and see if what happened to Mr. Vincent really has something to do with me. Seeing what happened on the birthday dinner, I always felt that Elizabeth was keeping something from me. I remember the back of a man in a tuxedo. Don't you know divination yourself? Elizabeth asked in surprise. Selina deliberately learned to father Siway. Hey, my current state is not suitable for divination. Well, let's go to the divination club next to us first. Elizabeth agreed to her friend's proposal. They came to the side and entered the divination club on the second floor along the stairs. Hello. Good afternoon, Miss Angelica. Nice to see you again. In the reception hall, Selina made a lively greeting. Angelica smiles to say, as long as you come over after lunch, you should be able to meet me. Selina and each other a few commonplaces, mourning the Heiners Vincent, and then said, I need divination. You know the rules of the club. This is an album of members who are willing to read divinations for others. Today is the weekend, and many people are here. Angelica is familiar with the process that Selina and Elizabeth's heads are together, and they quickly look through the list and the corresponding introduction. I used to go directly to my teacher every time. I didn't expect that compared with last year, there were so many more members in the club who were willing to help people with divination. Selina said with great interest. Suddenly, she paused for a few seconds, wondering and whispering. Klein Maridi? Is this the same name as Melissa's brother? Elizabeth, dazed, repeatedly read the word Klein Maridi several times, thoughtfully nods. Yes, Miss Angelica, is Mr. Klein Maridi here? Selina asked with bright eyes. Angelica shook her head. I'm sorry, Mr. Klein Maridi didn't come to the club today. All right, change another one. Selina didn't have to know each other. She just snickered at her friend and said, I know this can't be Melissa's brother, but when I saw this name, I naturally came up with a news headline such as the Intis Post. The Intis Post, founded by Roselle the Great, is one of the most famous newspapers in the northern mainland with its sensational headlines. Elizabeth asked not too intently. What title? Selina cleared his throat and said, Is it a moral corruption or a social problem? History college students are actually reduced to helping people with divination to maintain their lives on weekends. Note 1. This passage is changed from Rousseau. Emiled, chapter 112 asks explanation. Backlander, Queens, Audrey Hall sat in a hanging chair in a cool corner, looking at the flowers blooming in the sun, and thinking about the matter that Voss Wall asked for help. according to Viscount Glint's verification. There really is a young girl named Hugh Dilcha who is being held in a temporary prison in the northern district of Backlund. Her charge is that a property dispute has seriously hurt a decent gentleman, leaving him still lying in a hospital bed, and he may never stand up again. In this regard, Fowles explained that the gentleman was not a good man. He was a gangster in the eastern part of Backlander and lived on usury. The cause of the incident was that a borrower found that the interest rate was several times higher than he expected, and even if he went bankrupt, he could not repay it. In the case of fruitless negotiation with the gentleman, he found Hugh Dilcha, a well-known arbitrator, nearby, hoping that she could persuade the other party to avoid unreasonable parts. The gentleman didn't obey Hugh Dilcha's ruling, and even threatened to take away the borrower's wife and children that night. So Hugh Dilcha changed his persuasion skills and adopted physical means, which caused serious damage by carelessness. Viscount Glint investigated the incident and confirmed that Fowles Wall's description was true. He also confirmed that the gang leader lost control of his opponent, and after someone's visit in the middle of the night, he forgave the borrower's debt and issued a statement to the prosecutor forgiving Hugh Dilcha, but the case of serious injury was not that the victim would not be prosecuted if he didn't want to pursue it. Glint wanted to solve it in a normal way and sent someone to consult a familiar barrister. The other party said that it was only a light sentence, but it was very difficult to plead not guilty unless the parties could get a medical certificate that they had mental problems or mental development was not perfect. Audrey silently talked to herself, leaning towards her friend's opinions. For her, the most important thing is not to have a relationship with Fowles Wall and Hugh Dilcha after the Tarot Club. Audrey felt that she was no longer an innocent girl. There will be a dance at the Earl of Wolf's tomorrow night, and then tell Glint to follow the advice of the barrister. Audrey nodded slightly and made a decision. In the Kingdom of Ruan, lawyers are divided into barristers and solicitors. The latter is responsible for matters that don't need to go to court, such as collecting evidence, talking with clients, helping people draw up wills, supervising property distribution, and providing legal advisory services. Of course, they can also represent clients in the most elementary magistrate's court to defend simple cases. A barrister is a lawyer who studies evidence and defends the client in court. According to the law of the Kingdom of Ruan, they must maintain an objective attitude, so they can't contact the client directly. They can only collect information through their assistants, that is, lawyers. Each of them is a real legal expert with outstanding eloquence and a high level of debate. Audrey, who was relaxed again, looked at the colorful flowers outside with the attitude of hiding in the dark and peeping into the light, and suddenly thought of one thing. Medical certificate of mental problem or mental development is not perfect. Psychological doctor. If the psychological alchemist has mastered the acting method, does that mean that you can find them in the psychological doctor group? Thought of here, Audrey felt that her thinking was right, and her eyes were as bright gems. Just then, she saw Susie, the big golden retriever, sneak behind the flowers in a furtive manner and sneak to a place where only gardeners can arrive. Susie, what is it going to do? Audrey hid in the shadows and stared blankly. The golden retriever dog seems to be confused by the smell of flowers and doesn't notice the owner behind him. It opens its mouth and makes a sigh sound. Then, it makes the surrounding air vibrate, and the words that are not round enough are sounded. Hello. How are you? Audrey's mouth opened a little bit, completely forgetting the etiquette that an elegant lady should have. She couldn't believe what she saw and the stiff voice she heard. She suddenly stood up and blurted out, Susie, can you talk? When will you talk? The golden retriever jumped up in fright and turned to face his master. It rattled and quickly wagged its tail, and its mouth opened several times before it shook the surrounding air passage. I don't know how to explain it. After all, I'm just a dog. Hearing the sentence, Audrey was speechless at the moment. On Monday morning, Klein, who was on vacation, reviewed and consolidated his knowledge of mysticism according to the scheduled plan, and then took a bus to Hoy University. He wants to contact Mr. Askey Moore and see what the other party knows in the 3-story gray stone building belonging to the history department. Klein chatted with his tutor Cohen Quinton for a while, exchanging things related to the ancient ruins of the main peak of Henachus. Without extra gains, he took advantage of the opportunity of his tutor to handle affairs, entered the office diagonally opposite, and went to the left behind Ask teacher's desk. "Mr. Ask, can I have a word with you?" He looked at the teacher with bronze complexion, soft facial features, and a small mole under his right ear, and took off his hat. Brown eyes hidden indescribable vicissitudes of life. "AZ, finishing the books." "No problem. Let's go for a walk by the Hoy River." "Okay." Klein left the 3-story gray stone building with a cane in his hand. Along the way, both of them remained silent, and no one spoke. When the flowing river comes into view, when there are no more teachers and students coming and going around, Askton stops, turns around, and faces Klein's way. "What can I do for you?" Klein pondered for a long time, thought of many euphemistic ways, but gave up one by one, so he calmly and directly asked, "Mr. Ask, you are a trustworthy and respectable gentleman. I want to know what you see for me, or what do you know? I mean, the last time you said that my fate was out of harmony." "AZG," ordered the cane. Sigh laugh. "I didn't expect you to be so direct that I didn't know how to answer. Frankly speaking, the incongruity of your destiny is the only thing I can see, and I don't know more than you." Klein hesitated and asked, "But why can you see?" "I don't believe this stems from divination." Ask sighed, head looking at the Hoy River, tone with somewhat bleak. "No, Klein, you don't understand. Divination can do this. It just depends on who will do it. Of course, my divination is just an excuse. Some people are always special and have some strange abilities, and I should be such a person." "Should?" Klein has a keen grasp of the other party's choice of words. "Yes, I don't know if I was born with it. Maybe the price of that ability is to forget myself, forget the past, and forget my parents." Ask's eyes looked at the river slightly sadly. Klein more listened to more confused. "Forget the past?" "AZ, no smile," smiled to say with smile. "Before I entered the history department of Backlunda University, I lost most of my memory, only remembering my name and basic knowledge. Fortunately, I have proof of identity, otherwise I can only become a tramp. For so many years, I have searched for my parents according to my proof of identity, but I have not gained anything, even if I can see the corner of my destiny. During my years in college, I gradually discovered that I have some strange abilities that are beyond the scope of common sense." Klein listened very intently and blurted out, "Ask, sir, why do you have amnesia?" "No, I mean, did you find the cause of amnesia at the scene?" He suspects that Mr. Askey is a member of the School of Life with amnesia, even a member of the middle sequence with a high status. This is a secret organization that corresponds to the monster and has been a prophet and is mainly passed down from master to apprentice. AZG heavily shook his head. "No, it seems that after sleep, I forgot the past." He took a cane and took a few steps forward, walking, and said, "After leaving Backlunda, I began to dreaming of many strange things." "Dream?" "I am good at interpreting dreams." Into the professional field of Klein immediately asked, "What kind of dream is it?" AZG vague low laugh. Many different dreams. Sometimes I dream of the dark inside of the mausoleum, dreaming of ancient coffins. The bodies inside lie prone, with white feathers growing behind them. Sometimes I dream that I am a knight in full armor, carrying a 3-meter pike and rushing to the enemy. Sometimes I dream that I am a lord, with a rich manor, a beautiful wife, and 3 children. Sometimes I dream that I am a tramp, caught in the rain, walking on a muddy road, cold and hungry. Sometimes I dream that I have a daughter who is different from the other children. She has soft black hair, likes to sit on the swing made by me, and always asks me for candy. Sometimes I dream that I am standing by the gallows, coldly looking up at the floating bodies. Listening to Ask's gibberish, Klein found himself unable to interpret each other's dreams because the symbols of different dreams are opposite and contradictory. AZ, look back. Her voice is no longer wandering way. The kingdom of Nepot in the south believes in Mother Earth, and the Church of Mother Earth preaches an idea. They believe that every life is a plant, absorbing the nutrients of the earth and slowly growing, prospering, and declining. When they die, these lives will fall into the earth and return to their mother's arms. In the next year, they will grow again, and flowers will bloom and fall. Year after year, Life will be the same, and life will be the same. Sometimes, I am willing to believe this statement. I believe that because of my own particularity, I can dream of the last life and the fragments of the next life. Speaking of which, he looked at Klein and sighed. These things I didn't even talk about Cohen, tell you, because AZ grams of the next laugh. I'm sorry, my description just now is not accurate enough. It's not the only thing I can see that your destiny is not harmonious. I also see another thing. Klein, you are not normal anymore. You have extraordinary and strange abilities, just like me. Chapter 113 requests Mr. Ask can see that I am extraordinary. His ability is really bad. Klein, dazed, calmly replied, yes. He wanted to think and added, because of the Welch and Naya thing. As I expected, Ask sighed. There were 2 police officers who came to the school to question Cohen and me. That should be the captain and Leonard, who took over Welch's case. Klein nodded faintly and didn't interrupt. AZG slightly raised the caneway. You should have entered that circle. I hope you can help me find the clue of my origin. It doesn't need you to do it specially. Just remember it when you meet it. Having said that, he had a wry smile. Except for you, I don't know anyone with extraordinary abilities. You can never imagine how a person with no past will feel. It's like a ship drifting on the sea. The most terrible thing is not to encounter a storm, but to find a port and a route to land. You can only meet disasters again and again, never ending. Never feeling calm and safe. No, Mr. Ask, I can understand your feelings very well because I am the same person. Fortunately, I have the original owner Memento Mori, and I have Benson and Melissa. Klein replied silently and asked instead, Mr. Ask, why don't you go into a similar circle and look for useful clues yourself? Ask looked into Klein's eyes and laughed at himself, because I am afraid of danger and death. He sighed. I am used to the present life and I like it. I don't want or have the courage to take risks. I can only ask you. Klein didn't say much, promised. If I can meet relevant clues, I will pay special attention. Well, it's time for us to go back to the office. When Cohen comes back from doing things, we'll have lunch together, remember? The Dongbailong restaurant in the school is quite good. Oh, it's my treat. Ask raised his cane and pointed to the direction when he came. I'm sorry, I really don't remember that when I was in college, the original owner didn't have the money to go to Dongbailong restaurant. Even if Welch invited them, he would refuse this relatively luxurious place. Klein pressed his hat and followed Ask back to the 3-story gray stone building in the history department. It took a few steps. AZG suddenly said, Things at school are finished, and I will welcome my summer vacation. You can visit my home or write to me later. Klein nodded, casual gossip way. Mr. Ask, I thought you would go to Dixie Bay for your holiday. No, it's too hot in the south now. I don't like the so-called sunbathing. Look at my skin color, it's easy to get tanned. Comparatively speaking, I'd rather go to Lindong County, go to the north of the Fusak Empire, ski, see the scenery, and catch seals. Ask, who has bronze skin, replied with a smile, Did I also want to? Klein, the new night watchman, looks envious, after lunch and returning home. He took a nap and began to review and study the advanced knowledge of spells and amulets, hoping to master them as soon as possible and make products that can be barely used in combat and help himself initially. A few minutes before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Klein packed his things and sealed the bedroom with a spiritual wall. Above the fog, in the magnificent temple, the ancient and mottled bronze long table was quietly placed. Klein, who was shrouded in a thick gray fog, sat in the first place, watching the still vague Justice and upside-down people appear in their fixed seats. Gee, Miss Justice's mood is unstable, worried, uneasy, and confused. Klein, who opened Second Sight early, only glanced at it and noticed the abnormality of the only female member of the Tarot Club. Audrey Hall's current mood can hardly be described in words. Susie's sudden speech gave her a strong impact to the extreme. In her expectation, the future development should be that Miss Audrey, a big detective or a well-known psychologist, takes her assistant Susie, a big dog, but if Susie, a big dog detective, takes her assistant Miss Audrey, then no, not some. That's very strange and overwhelming. Audrey suddenly sat up straight and wanted to ask Mr. Fool and the upside-down man for advice. Her words to the mouth, suddenly pharynx back. Well, how should I ask? What should I do if my pet is abnormal? How to get along with a pet with a good IQ and can talk? No, no, no. This is a tarot club, not a pet-raising experience sharing meeting. I bet if I really ask this question, my good image in the eyes of Mr. Fool and upside-down people will be directly broken. Audrey thought sharply and finally organized the language. Dear Mr. Fool, Mr. Hanging Man who always helps me, I have a question to ask. What can a pet with extraordinary power do to help its owner? Simply put, what can it do? As she spoke, she found that Mr. Fool and the upside-down man fell silent at the same time, and the atmosphere suddenly became a bit strange. Hey, talk to me. Don't look at me like that. I didn't do anything. Really, I asked for my friend. Audrey was so ashamed that she wanted to find a crack in the ground. She deeply regrets why she asked such a question. In combination with what Miss Justice asked ordinary animals what would happen if they took the cereal potions. Did she let her own potions be shared by her pets? This is what Miss Justice can do. With such a member, my boss, a cult organization, always feels chilly. Klein raised his right hand, held it against his forehead, squeezed it twice and made no answer. Alger Wilson, an upside-down man, was silent for more than 10 seconds, and his tone was slightly strange, and he replied, It depends on what kind of extraordinary ability the pet has. For example, if it is an audience, it can observe and listen in on some occasions instead of you. You know, people will be wary of the same kind, but it is unlikely to suspect that the pet is eavesdropping, even if the pet is squatting at his feet. That makes sense. Most of the time, when Dad and other nobles, parliamentarians, and ministers discuss important things, he will avoid me and lock the door of the study, but Susie will not be driven away as long as she can avoid the initial clearance. And those ladies and gentlemen also like to communicate in private circles. Audrey heard her eyes bright and immediately tried to extrapolate. Besides, Susie can talk now, so she can tell me what she heard directly. Susie is great. I will treat you well, and I will teach you to know words and standard pronunciation. Well, is it to teach Susie aristocratic pronunciation or a normal Backlander accent? Will it be recognized when it goes out to say hello to other dogs in the future? And so on? Why should I consider this? It can communicate with other dogs without using human language. Wait a minute, Mr. Upside Down. Why do you directly use audience as an example? Don't you all guess what? Audrey, facial expression, a sit-up straight again, smiling, and said, Mr. Fool, I found another page of Roselle's diary. I got this from Fowl's Wall. Very well. All the debts you owe have been paid off. Klein answered in a good mood. I'm sorry. There is not much content in this page of diary. Audrey expressed what she remembered on the existing parchment. Klein, right hand a lift, let parchment directly in his palm, and freely said, It doesn't affect my promise, and the diary you brought last time has 2 sides. The diaries collected by the righteous and upside-down people are not the original version of Roselle the Great, but belong to the copied version of later researchers. Some people will record them unilaterally for preservation, while others will keep them unchanged for convenience. While speaking, Klein slanted his eyes and looked at the first few lines of the diary. On December 20th, a new year is about to begin, but the feedback I get one after another makes me very confused and embarrassed. The world can't find oil. I can't find oil. Chapter 114 Criteria for Membership. No oil? I can't find it for some reason. Or is it really not? It has been more than 150 years since Roselle the Great was assassinated, and there is still no trace of oil. Klein's pupil contracted and his hand holding the diary almost shook. Without oil, it not only means that the emergence of internal combustion engine will become unknown, but also will lead to the stagnation of chemical industry, so that the real modern industry of the earth cannot be established. In other words, Klein was somewhat unexpected about the next development of the world. That his original plan was that although he only knew a little about everything, he could not do inventions, but he was better at knowing a little about everything, and he could foresee the direction of change and the trend of the times. When he accumulated enough salary and had the first bucket of gold, he would make venture capital in promising industries and not put his eggs in the same basket. Klein thinks that sooner or later, he will have a lot of wealth. At that time, he will find white gloves as an agent on the surface, and then set up an international charity fund to help the poor on the surface and secretly subsidize the labor resistance of various countries, so as to play a game with the upper class of society and improve the lives of the lower class. If he finds a way to return to Earth, he will divide the property, 1/3 to Benson, 1/3 to Melissa, and 1/3 to his own foundation. However, it is a pity that this beautiful imagination for the future was broken by half in a moment. Well, the world has electricity and magnetism, and there are successful cases of telegraphy. I will mainly invest in this direction in the future. After a pause, Klein's eyes moved down line by line. On December 21st, don't think about oil. It's king to upgrade your own sequence level. On December 22nd, the environment in the old city of Lisha was unacceptable. If I hadn't visited incognito, I might never have known that it still looked like what I saw when I was young. I want to gather my ministers and make a plan to improve the sewers and public toilets in the capital. Well, I also need to correct the wrong habits of residents, let them drink hot water, wash their hands frequently, don't litter, urinate everywhere, and use it as much as possible. So, the invention of condoms has to be put on the agenda, as well as masks and paper cups. Well, the original version will do.
Give it a try.
Thanks to the world, it also has rubber trees. Answer. Every sentence above is true. Klein added silently in his mind. Dast relaxed a little, corner at each other's revolver. Dowd asked, "It's hard for me to understand why you came to me." "I don't think I have exposed anything," Klein smiled and said. "It's just an accident. Maybe fate arranged for us to know each other. Actually, we met in the underground trading market of the Dragon Bar, but you didn't pay attention to me at that time. Although you cleverly purchased the auxiliary materials of the cereal potions separately, it is still worthy of attention for me, who just know this formula." Dast abrupt spit out a sigh, as if lost the motivation to defend. "So that's it. I thought I was careful enough. Unexpected. Whispering a few words, he stared at Klein's eyes and said, "Officer, I know you are not here to arrest me. What is your real purpose?" Klein looked relaxed and said, "I am different from other night watchmen. I don't think that every extraordinary person who doesn't belong to us is a potential criminal, which is unfair to those who yearn for order and kindness." Dast changed the sitting position, no longer so nervously said, "If other night watchmen, Punisher, and Mechanical Heart members can be like you, then the world will be peaceful. Do you know the Night Watchman, the Penalty Taker, and the members of the Mechanical Heart?" Klein pretended to be surprised. This is not something that a person who has strayed into an extraordinary field should know. There must be an organization behind you. He leaned back, corners of the mouth with a smile. Psychological alchemy? At the same time, he looked at Dast's face a little ugly. "I can see that you are expecting my answer, but you still ignore something that seems normal and fall into your language trap." Dast whispered ruefully. He began to find that the audience state is not omnipotent, and he can see the purpose of the other party, but it does not mean that he can figure out the specific details. Klein rubbed his pistol wheel way. "Doctor, we must communicate honestly, and this can start with me. I don't think that the unmanaged extraordinary person is a potential criminal, but I agree to register and supervise every extraordinary person. This is a precaution against the risk of getting out of control and avoiding more serious and dangerous situations. I won't disturb your normal life. I hope we can cooperate in a limited way." "Limited cooperation?" Dast asked as if thinking. Klein low laugh a track. "Yes, there are limits. For example, report your status to me regularly. You know, many out-of-control incidents are possible to be saved when the situation is not so serious, and the Night Watchman has accumulated enough experience in this regard. For example, in your organization, among the extraordinary people you know, if someone is about to endanger the innocent, please provide me with clues in time. For example, exchanging something for something more useful to you is a welfare for you, and you should know the meaning of welfare. In addition, You don't have to worry anymore, and you don't have to be afraid of being suddenly arrested or killed by the night watchman, the penalty taker, and the members of the Mechanical Heart. You can enjoy your life safely and happily. We'll give you some identification items that you can use at the last moment when there is no other way. Das silent listen. It took a while to ask. You want me to betray my organization? No, not betrayal. Klein Chen Ken said, this is the maintenance of justice, morality, and kindness. You are preventing some evil, brutal, and bloody cases. Except for this, I will not let you betray the secrets of your organization. Das thought it over carefully and seemed to feel a little better because he had an excuse. He was silent for a few seconds, stretched out his right hand, and said, Happy cooperation. Klein shook hands with each other without a gun. Happy cooperation. He paused, light say with smile. Doctor, you can tell me whether you are a member of the Psychological Alchemy Society. Yes. Das marked his head. Haven opened the door second sight. Klein didn't find each other's emotional color fluctuations, so Consider asked, How did you join the Psychological Alchemy Club? Das looked into each other's eyes and said, Because of a patient in this madhouse. When I saw him, I found that he could completely see through me and didn't look like a madman soberly. His name is Hudyujin. Klein remembered the name, talked with Das again, and agreed on the secret delivery method of the meeting request and the meeting place. He didn't communicate with each other about potions, formulas, rumors, etc. for the time being. He offered to leave at the right time, put away his revolver, and left Das' office. Looking at his back, disappeared in the doorway. Das suddenly spit out a sigh and leaned back limply, some pain and some relaxation. 36 Sotland Street, inside Blackthorn Security Company. Sitting behind a desk, Dunn's gray eyes swept away and asked, Is there anything wrong? Klein, who was nearly half an hour late, organized a language way. Captain, I found an extraordinary person and confirmed that he is a member of the Psychological Alchemy Society. He is a decent doctor and willing to cooperate with us. I think it is best to keep the current state, which will help us to know the latest situation of the Psychological Alchemy Club in time. After a few seconds, Klein added, I want to develop him into an informant of the Night Watchman or a secret peripheral member. The word informer comes from Indy, from Roselle the Great. Done slowly a moment to say, You handled it very well, but if there is such a thing in the future, you'd better tell me first. Submit the doctor's information and the written information of your handling process to me, and I will give him some items to prove his identity. Also, don't tell Leonard about this. Although they are trustworthy teammates, the relevant regulations have clear provisions. You are responsible for contacting that doctor in the future. Klein silently exhaled, smiling way. Okay. Chapter 118. August time passed smoothly, and Tinjin sent away the summer tale. By mid-August, the temperature had stabilized at 267 degrees Celsius at Hua. Klein suddenly stood up from the bathtub and stepped out, bringing drops of water. He stood there naked, looked down at his abdomen, and with a little effort, he saw the lines of the muscles clearly outlined. This is the result of his persistent training these days, and besides, the whole person also looks a lot more energetic today. His fighting teacher Gao began to teach him the basic boxing footwork and power. Skills. Bang, bang, bang. Klein's bare foot stepped on the bathroom floor, sometimes slipping forward, sometimes retreating sharply, sometimes flashing right, accompanied by punching and blocking. Few. He stopped, sighed with joy, took the towel next to him and wiped himself. For more than 2 weeks after contacting Das Guderian, an insane asylum doctor, Klein seemed to get rid of the coincidence, left the strange circle where he always encountered extraordinary events, and his life became stable. He led his salary step by step, studied the occult, practiced shooting and fighting, transplanted and developed new dishes, and accumulated decent tableware and furnishings one by one with his brother Benson and sister Melissa, consulted Captain Dunn and teammate Leonard, and went to the club to help people with divination. This made his mind stable. If he didn't miss the earth in the dead of night, if he didn't find out about the red chimney, and if the pattern conveyed by the bad luck puppet occasionally appeared in his dreams, he would start to get used to and miss his present life. During this period, the Tarot Club was convened for 3 times. Klein did not get a new Roselle diary, but according to Justice, she met two extraordinary people and was naturally contacting them. When she entered the corresponding circle, she should be able to trade more Roselle diaries. And hanging upside down also means that he has returned to land and is dealing with some affairs. As long as he is free, he will start looking for it immediately. In addition, Justice feels that the two new extraordinary people she knows are worthy of development. For example, each has a good cover of open identity, different resources, different persistence and characteristics, and is not the kind of person who will sell secrets at will. The only problem is that they only have Sequence 9, which is not suitable for the high-end and strict secret organization of Tarot Club, a high-end organization. I feel more like pyramid schemes. Klein, the fool at that time, just wanted to hide his face and sigh, but he couldn't find words to deal with Miss Justice's good self-feeling, so he could only promise to let her make further observation on those two extraordinary people. Of course, Justice is not the naive and romantic girl at the beginning. She carefully didn't mention the names and characteristics of the two extraordinary people, fearing that hanging people upside down would find herself accordingly. Miss Justice said that she clearly felt the signs of potions digestion. Maybe in 3 or 4 weeks, she will be able to play the role of audience. The formula of mind reader has to be put on the agenda. Klein, who cleaned her body, put the towel aside and put on close-fitting clothes, thinking about the things at the Tarot Club the day before yesterday. In the past 20 days, he only met with Dr. Dast Guderian once. In the idea of haste makes waste, he only chatted about each other's status and asked the psychological alchemist about something irrelevant. However, the speed at which Justice digested the potions forced him to figure out how to get the formula of Sequence 8, Mind Reader, from Dast in advance, button the shirt one by one, and Klein picked up another dry towel and wrapped it around his head to absorb the moisture from his short hair. Compared with Justice, he digested the potions of Diviner only quickly, but not slowly. By this week, when he was in meditation and second sight state, he had not heard anything he shouldn't have heard or seen anything he shouldn't have seen. The towel, Klein, and wiped her hair, looked up at the door, silent himself. The Diviner's code I summarized is really effective. I should be able to completely digest the potions next week. I don't know where to get the Hornet's Grey Goat one-horn crystals and face roses in the clown formula. Maybe I can learn from Ms. Daly and submit a special application, but that will definitely be concerned by the upper level. I just want to develop obscenity now. The believers who will develop Aurora in the police department have also been found, but Henry said that I can finish the Red Chimney entrustment before the end of this week. My private money has returned to the early £7, so I don't have to worry about how to pay the balance. Before he gave some houses and guest information, I couldn't see the problem temporarily, and I didn't have time to check them one by one. Maybe we can see which house with a red chimney has recently changed its residence. Well, this is an idea. After sitting for 20 or 30 seconds, he put on gray-black trousers, tied a bow tie, fastened his gun bag, threw the changed knight's training suit into the laundry basket, opened the door, and walked out of the bathroom. He had just finished fighting training on Wednesday afternoon and was still at the home of his teacher Gawain. "Hello, Mr. Moridi." Gawain's handyman happened to pass by and bowed down. Klein nodded slightly, pointing to the messy, wet bathroom way. "Please clean it up." "It's my duty. The clothes will be handled by the star washer. She will come at 6. The handyman replied with her head down. The starching women workers don't include food and accommodation, and their remuneration is very low. Therefore, they are not only employed by one family, but often contract the clothes of many residents nearby, or rush to go to another family immediately after washing one family, or collect all of them at home for processing and returning them in turn. Only in this way can they barely survive. Klein said nothing more, went to the living room, and said goodbye to the owner sitting in the rocking chair. He saw Gawain, whose temples were white, nodding angrily with a light brown blanket on his legs and a copy of Joni Ahotal Evening News in his hand. Klein knew that the man bathed in the west oblique sunshine was actually just in his early 50s, but he seemed to be in his 80s and 90s in the usual fighting training. Gawain also kept silent, only spoke when he was supposed to give directions, and never said much or chatted. Klein, however, was too tired to live every day and lacked the desire to take the initiative to talk, so the relationship between the two sides is still cold. Look at Gawain's demonstration. His strength is quite amazing, and his pace is agile enough. It is not a problem to beat me 3 times. He has the salary given by the police department and bought a piece of land in the countryside on the outskirts of Tianjin, which can charge a fixed rent. He employs a chef, a handyman maid, and a starched woman worker in a big food-eating country on earth. A man in his 50s and 60s with such wealth has traveled all over the world early. Klein withdrew his eyes from Gawain, shook his head secretly, then went to the coat rack and took off his half-height silk hat and black thin trench coat. Dressed neatly, he took his cane, walked out of the house, and approached the gate along the stone road with weeds on both sides. Just then, he saw a 2-wheeled carriage parked outside the iron fence, and a familiar man standing to Leonard. Klein looked doubtfully at the night watchman's teammate with messy hair and whispered to himself. Leonard, wearing a white shirt, black trousers, and buttonless boots, was spinning his hat in his hand. When he saw Klein coming out, he said with a smile, "Surprise?" "Only surprised, not happy." Klein ignored each other's immorality, staring at the fake poet's green eyes. "What's the matter?" Leonard put on his hat and said, "The captain asked you to cooperate with Fry and me, and we will talk about it in detail on the way." "Okay." Klein followed each other into the carriage. When the scenery on both sides swept back, Leonard picked up the briefcase next to him and threw it across the street. Klein caught it firmly, took out the file, and read it carefully. At 11 o'clock on the evening of August 11th, Thors, who went bankrupt, tried to set fire to the house and create a tragedy, but in the end, he only burned himself. At 10 o'clock on the evening of August 11th, the docker Zaid jumped into the Tasik River, ending the poor life. On August 11th, at 8 o'clock in the evening, Mrs. Lowes, who lived by pasting matchboxes in Tycross Street, suddenly died of illness. When he saw the first 2 things, Klein was puzzled. He thought that similar deaths were too common. Not only should the night watchman not pay attention to them, but even the police department should avoid the waste of police force. But looking down, he gradually frowned, turned over 2 pages. He suddenly looked up and looked at Leonard's way. "Isn't that too much?" When the number of normal deaths is astounding, it is difficult to call it normal. Leonard Rare solemnly nods. "The number of deaths in the past 2 weeks is 5 times normal. I found this problem when the police headquarters of Tianjin City counted the data and quickly handed over the matter to us, and handed it over to the Punisher and the Mechanical Heart. Although there is no problem in the initial verification of these deaths, the captain thinks that we must check it again, and this may require the assistance of divination or ritual magic." Klein suddenly way. "I see." Leonard made a snap of his fingers. "Me, you and Fry. He is waiting for us at Tycross Street. Shijia, Luoyao, and Old Neil are working together to investigate the corresponding incidents in the North District, and the captain stays in the security company to deal with accidents." Klein nodded solemnly, suddenly remembering something, and quickly asked, "Can I go home first and leave a note?" "He has to tell his brother and sister that he has something to do tonight and won't eat at home." Leonard laughed. "No problem, just on the way." Klein settled down and looked through those deaths again, trying to find the connection from different ways of death, different names, and different time points. Watch, he seems to think. "This is my first collective task since I became a night watchman. P.S. Let me say a few words about a plot yesterday without spoilers. If I want to force Klein not to open Second Sight so as to miss the observation, then I will use a softer and less uncomfortable way, such as opening Second Sight, but I found nothing or just a minor mental problem, so there are enough reasons to explain later. So, why should we emphasize being too late and forgetting? Why? At least have some confidence in me." Hey, that chapter 119, The Real Street No. 2, Daffodil Street. Tianjin. Klein, who left the note, locked the door, and walked quickly to Leonard Mitchell, who was waiting by the roadside. Leonard's short black hair is a little longer than that of last month, and it looks very messy without care. But even so, with his good looks, emerald eyes, and poet's temperament, there is still an alternative aesthetic feeling. Sure enough, any hairstyle depends on the face. Klein subconsciously spit, pointing to the direction of Iron Cross Street. "Fry's waiting for us over there?" "Yes." Leonard adjusted the shirt that didn't go in and asked casually, "Did you find any clues from the data?" Klein left hand holding a stick along the edge of the street. "No, I can't find a pattern in either the way or the time of death. You know, rituals involving evil spirits and demons must be coordinated with a specific time or a special way." Leonard touched the special revolver hidden under his waist and shirt and chuckled a track. "This is not absolute. In my experience, some evil gods or demons are very easy to satisfy as long as they have a strong interest in the next thing. And there must be a considerable number of these deaths that are normal, and they must be eliminated to get the correct answer." Klein caught a glimpse of him. "That's why the captain asked us to re-explore and rule out normal events." "Leonard, your tone and description tell me that you have sufficient experience in similar fields, but you have been a night watchman for less than 4 years. On average, you encounter no more than 2 extraordinary cases every month, and most of them are simple and easy to solve." He always thought Leonard Mitchell was a strange and mysterious teammate. He not only doubted himself and thought he was special, but also was sometimes distracted, sometimes arrogant, sometimes frivolous, and sometimes deep. Does he also have an adventure? There are also adventures that make him feel that he is the protagonist of the drama. Klein combined with a wealth of movies, novels, and TV series knowledge and made a rough guess. Hearing his question, Leonard smiled and said, "This is because you have not officially entered the state of night watchman, and you are still in the training stage. Every 6 months, the Holy Church will sort out the extraordinary cases encountered by churches in various parishes into books and make certain deletions in different versions according to different levels of confidentiality, and then distribute them to all members accordingly. Outside the occult course, you can apply to the captain, enter the Cheney's Gate, and borrow the previous casebooks." Klein suddenly nods. "The captain has never reminded me of this." "Up to now, he hasn't had a chance to enter the Cheney's Gate," Leonard chuckled and said. "I thought you were used to the captain's style, but I didn't expect you to be naive enough to expect him to remind you." Having said that, he meaningfully added, "If the captain remembers everything and forgets nothing, then we need to be vigilant." "This means out of control?" Klein expression solemnly and asked, "This is the captain's unique style? I thought it was a problem attached to the sleepless sequence. Memory loss caused by staying up late. To be precise, it is the unique style of nightmare. Reality and dreams are intertwined, and people often can't tell which ones are true. You need to remember which ones are false, so you don't need to put them in your mind." Leonard wanted to say something more, but the two of them have stepped into Iron Cross Street and saw Fry, the corpse collector, waiting at the rail bus stop. Fry wore a black felt hat with round edges, a thin trench coat of the same color, and a suitcase in his hand. His pale complexion made people suspect that he would suddenly fall down at any time, while the cold and dark temperament made the waiting people around him stay away from him. After nodding to each other, the three of them did not speak, but met in silence, crossed the slim bakery together and turned to Tycross Street. The noise immediately came to my face, and street vendors selling oyster soup, fried fish, ginger beer, and fruit shouted at the top of their lungs, which made pedestrians involuntarily slow down. At this time, it was early 5 o'clock, and many people returned to Tycross Street. The two sides of the road began to be crowded, and some children were mixed in, watching all this coldly and staring at all the pockets. Klein often comes here to buy cheap cooked food, and used to live in a nearby apartment. He knows the state of the place quite well, so he warned, "Beware of thieves." Leonard smiled and said, "Never mind." He pulled his shirt, adjusted his gun bag, and exposed the revolver at his waist. He ran. Watching his eyes have moved away, the pedestrians around also unconsciously gave up a road. Klein Lung quickly keep up with Leonard and Fry and lower the head. To prevent people who know notice yourself, Benson and Melissa still keep in touch with some of their former neighbors. After all, they haven't moved far enough, passing through the area with many street vendors. The three of them entered the real Tycross Street. Passers-by here are all dressed in old and tattered clothes. They are full of vigilance and greed for the appearance of strange and glamorous people. It seems that vultures staring at carrion may attack at any time, but Leonard's revolver effectively stopped all accidents. Let's start with the death last night. starting with Mrs. Laws, who made matchboxes. Leonard turned over the information and pointed to the nearby road. Number 134, first floor. As the three of them moved forward, the ragged children quickly hid on the side of the road and stared at them with vacant, curious, and scared eyes. Look at their arms and legs, just like matchsticks. Leonard sighed and took the lead in entering number 134 with 3 floors. All kinds of mixed gases suddenly got into Klein's nostrils, and he could vaguely distinguish the smell of urine, the smell of sweat, the musty smell of damp, and the smell of burning coal, and I couldn't help but raise my hand and cover my nose. Klein saw Beach Mountbatten waiting here. The sheriff in charge of the surrounding neighborhood has a brown beard and is full of flattery to Leonard, who shows his identity as an inspector. Sir, I've asked Travis to wait in the room. Beach Mountbatten laughed with a slightly tapering, unique voice. Obviously, he didn't recognize Klein, who was much more energetic and decent. He just wanted to please the 3 officers and led them into the Laws house on the first floor. This is a one-room house, with a 2-story high and low bed on the innermost side, a table on the right, paste, hard paper, and other items, a laundry list full of matchboxes in the corner, and a tattered cupboard on the left, where clothes and tableware are placed. There are stoves, toilets, and a small amount of coal, wood, and other things crowded on both sides of the door, and there are 2 dirty bunks in the center. A man is sleeping in a quilt with a rotten hole, which makes people almost unable to get off. In the lower berth of the bunk bed, a woman was lying there. Her skin was cold and gloomy, and obviously she had lost all her life. Next to the body sat a man in his 30s with greasy and messy hair. His expression was sluggish, and his eyes lost their spirits. Travis, these 3 police officers have come to examine the body and ask you something. Beach Mountbatten shouted, ignoring that there were people sleeping on the ground. Weak man looked up weakly, surprised, and asked, "Didn't you check it this morning? Have you asked?" He was wearing a gray-blue worker's suit, which was covered with sewing marks. "Let you answer and answer. How can there be so many questions?" Beachy Mountbatten reprimanded the other party severely, and then smiled at Leonard, Klein, and Fry. "Sir, that's Travis. In bed is his wife, the deceased. After our preliminary examination, she died of a sudden illness." Klein and others patted their toes and walked from the gap between the bunks to the bed. Fry, with a high nose and thin lips and a cold temperament, didn't speak. He only patted Laws gently and motioned for him to get out of the way so that he could examine the body himself. Klein looked at the man sleeping on the ground, wondering, and asked, "Who's this?" "Me, my tenant." Laws scratched a scalp and said, "This room costs 3 souls and 10 pence a week. I'm just a dock worker. My wife can only get 2 1/4 pence by pasting a basket of matchboxes. There are more than 130 boxes in a basket. We have children. I can only rent the spare space to others. A floor shop only needs 1 soul a week. I have a tenant who helps with the setting in the theater. He won't rest until 10 o'clock in the evening, so he sold the right to use the floor during the day to this gentleman, who is the man who guards the theater gate at night. Well, he only needs to pay 6 pence a week." Listening to each other's rambling introduction, Klein couldn't help looking at the laundry list in the corner. More than 130 boxes of a reed only earn 2.25p, which is almost the price of 2 pounds of brown bread. "How many reeds can you paste in a day?" Note 1. Leonard looked around and asked, "Was there anything unusual some time before your wife died?" Laws, who had already answered similar questions, pointed to his left chest and said, "Since last week? Well, maybe last week. She often said it was stuffy and breathless here." "Is there a precursor to heart disease? Normal death?" Klein interjected and asked, "Did you see how she died?" Lau Weiss recalled and said, "After the sun went down, she stopped working. Candles and kerosene were much more expensive than matchboxes. She said she was very tired. Let me talk to the 2 children. She took a rest first. When I looked at her again, she had stopped breathing." Speaking of which, Lovis's sadness and pain can no longer be concealed. Klein and Leonard asked several more questions, but failed to find unnatural and abnormal factors. After looked at each other, Leonard said, "Mr. Laws, please wait outside for a few minutes. We will do an in-depth examination of the body." I don't think you want to see the next picture. Good, good. Laws stood up hurriedly. Beach Mountbatten went to the side, kicked up the tenant who slept on the floor, rudely kicked the other side out, and shut the door wisely, and kept outside. How about it? Leonard immediately looked at Fry, died of heart disease. Fry took back his hands and said firmly. Klein thought about it, took out a copper coin with a denomination of half a penny, and planned to make a quick judgment. Mrs. Lawes's heart disease has extraordinary factors? No, this is too narrow, and the answer is misleading. Well, Mrs. Law's death was influenced by extraordinary factors. That's it. He whispered silently as if thinking, and quickly determined the divination sentence. In meditation, Klein came to Mrs. Law's body, his eyes deepened, and a coin popped up. When the reverberation echoed, the brass coin rolled down and stopped firmly in his palm. This time, the king's head is facing up. This shows that Mrs. Lawes's death is indeed influenced by extraordinary factors. Note 1. At the end of the Victorian era, there were 144 matchboxes in one basket, and the labor cost was 2.25p. The limit for a woman to be busy from morning till night was 7 baskets. Chapter 120. The Workhouse. There are extraordinary factors. Klein's eyes returned to normal, and he looked sideways at Leonard and Fried. Leonard suddenly smiled. Very professional. You are a fortune teller. You seem to be implying something. Klein muttered without making a sound. Fry opened the suitcase, took out a silver knife and other things, and paused for a few seconds. The body told me that she did die of a sudden heart attack. Can you tell me more details? Klein seriously nods. I can try the combination of channeling ceremony and dream divination, hoping to get something from Mrs. Law's remaining spirituality. Fry maintained a state of cold inside. Collect, back off 2 steps. You try first. He glanced at Klein with his head tilted and suddenly sighed without fluctuation. You are getting used to such occasions. I didn't want to. Klein felt like crying and took out the Pure Dew, essential oil and herbal powder one by one, and quickly completed the arrangement of the psychic ceremony. He recited the name of the goddess of the night in the middle of the spiritual wall and made a prayer in Hermes. Soon, there was a wind swirling around him, and the light became more and more dimmed. Klein, whose eyes were all black, seized the opportunity and repeated the divination statement. The cause of Mrs. Law's death. The cause of Mrs. Law's death. He stood and entered the dream, seeing the transparent spirit wandering around the body in the blur. Then, he stretched out his imaginary right hand and touched the remaining spirituality to Mrs. Law's. In an instant, light and shadow exploded in front of his eyes, and pictures flashed. It was a woman with a thin face and tattered clothes who was busy pasting matchboxes. That's when she suddenly paused and covered her chest. That's her talking to 2 children. That's her body shaking slightly and panting. It was when she went to buy brown bread that she was suddenly slapped. That is a sign that she has heart problems again and again. That's when she felt very tired and went to bed, but she never woke up. Klein carefully observed every detail, trying to find traces of the existence of extraordinary factors. But when it was all over, he still didn't get enough clear clues, blurred and hazy. Klein quits his dream and returns to reality. He lifted the spiritual wall and said to Fry waiting and Leonard at the theater, there is no direct symbol. Most of the pictures reveal that Mrs. Laws has suffered from heart disease for a long time. Only one pair is different from others. Mrs. Laws was slapped from behind. The hand is white and slender and seems to belong to a woman. For such a family, it is not easy to see a doctor until the most serious time. Even if they just queue up at a free charity medical organization, they can't afford to lose time. If they don't work one day, they may have no food the next day. Leonard sighed in a poetic and sentimental tone. Fry then looked at the body on the bed and breathed a sigh of relief. Before Klein spoke, Leonard quickly switched the state, as if thinking and saying, You mean, the extraordinary factor lies in the moment when Mrs. Laws was photographed, and it comes from a lady or a lady with slender hands? Klein nodded and answered, Yes, but this is just my interpretation. Divination is often vague. He and Leonard didn't discuss it again, so they retreated to the other side of the floor and let Fry take out the auxiliary equipment and materials from the suitcase without interference for further inspection. They waited for a moment. Fry packed all kinds of things, cleaned and covered them, turned and said, "There is no doubt that the cause of death is a natural heart disease." Hearing this conclusion, Leonard paced back and forth a few steps and even reached the door. It took him a long time to speak. "Come here first. Let's go to the West Workhouse to see if we can find other clues and see if the two deaths can be connected in series." "Well, that's the only way." Klein, who was full of doubts, agreed. Fry took the suitcase and walked and jumped through two bunks without stepping on other people's quilts. Leonard opened the door, took the lead and went out, and said to Travis and the tenant, "You can go home." Klein thought for a moment and added, "Don't rush to bury the body. Wait another day. Maybe there will be a thorough inspection." Okay, officer." Lovis bowed slightly and answered hastily. Then he said half numbly and half blankly, "Actually, I don't have the money to bury her for the time being. I have to save it for a few days. Fortunately, it's cool recently." Klein, surprised, blurted out, "Are you going to keep the body in the room for several days?" Lloyd squeezed out a smile way. "Well, it's okay. It's okay that the weather is cool recently. You can put the body on the table at night and carry her to bed when you eat." His words not to say that finish, Fry suddenly interrupted. "I left the funeral expenses next to your wife." Then, leaving such a plain word behind, he ignored Lovis's stunned expression and the ensuing thanks and quickly walked to the apartment door. Klein followed closely and has been thinking about a question. If the weather remains hot in June and July, what will Laws do with his wife's body? Find a dark and windy night and secretly throw the body into the Tassoc River and Hoy River? Or dig a hole anywhere and bury it? Klein knows that "must be buried in the cemetery" is a law specially formulated by 7 churches and royal families in various countries to reduce and eliminate water ghosts, zombies, and resentful souls more than 1,000 years ago. The specific implementation method is that countries provide free land and churches are responsible for guarding or patrolling, and only charge a small fee for cremation and burial to pay for the necessary labor. But even so, the real poor still can't afford it. After leaving number 134, Xiajia, TAC Street, the 3-night watchman separated from Beach Mountbatten and silently turned to the West Workhouse located in the nearby street. Just near there, Klein saw a long queue coming up, just like the situation that people in big food-eating countries row online celebrity stores on the earth. People are crowded with people. There are more than 100, no, close to 200 people. He whispered in surprise, and saw that the queues were all dressed in rags and numb, and only occasionally looked anxiously at the door of the workhouse. Fry slowed down, and his temperament was cold and gloomy. The number of homeless poor people that each workhouse can accept every day is limited, and it can only be selected according to the order of queuing. Of course, the workhouse will identify and prevent unqualified people from entering. This is also due to the recession in recent months. Leonard sighed. People who don't get the quota can only find their own way? Klein subconsciously asked one. They can also try their luck in other workhouses. Different workhouses open at different times. However, there will be queues of the same length. Some people are waiting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Fry paused.
Most of the remaining people will be hungry for a day, so they will lose their ability to find a job and fall into a vicious circle of going straight to death. Those who can't bear it will give up their insistence on kindness. Klein was silent for a few seconds, vomit a sigh away. Newspapers never publish these. Mr. Fry, I seldom hear you say so much. I used to be a priest in the workhouse of the goddess. Fry is still in that cold state. The 3 well-dressed people arrived at the gate of the West Workhouse smoothly, showed their certificates to the doorman who looked at the queue arrogantly, and were introduced into the workhouse. This workhouse was transformed from an old church. The mass hall was covered with cushions and hammocks, and the thick smell of sweat mixed with foot odor filled every corner. There are many homeless people inside and outside the hall. Some of them are waving hammers and breaking stones, while others are picking wadding from old ropes. No one is idle. In order to prevent the poor from relying on relief and becoming rogues, the Poor Law of 1336 stipulates that every poor person can only stay in the workhouse for 5 days at most, and they will be thrown out after that. And during these 5 days, they will also have to work, knock on stones, or pick ropes, which is also an inevitable project for those criminals in prison. Fry introduced 2 sentences to Klein and Leonard without any emotion. Leonard opened his mouth and finally said, "If you leave this workhouse, you can go to another one. Of course, you may not be able to live in it again. Well, maybe in some people's eyes, the poor are equal to criminals. Pick the rope?" Klein was silent for a moment. "I don't know what to ask. The fiber in the old rope is a good material to fill the gap in the ship." Fry stopped and found traces of the ground being burnt black. They waited for a few minutes, and the dean and priest of the workhouse came over, all men in their 40s. Souls set fire here and only burned himself. Leonard pointed to the trace on the ground. The dean of the workhouse is a man with a broad and slightly convex forehead. He swept his blue eyes in the direction pointed by Inspector Mitchell and must nod away. Yes. Before that, what was Souls' unusual performance? Klein added, "Dean of the workhouse wanted to think. According to the people sleeping next to him, Souls has been chanting, 'The Lord has abandoned me. The world is so filthy and dirty, and I have nothing,' full of resentment and despair. But no one expected that he was going to break all kerosene lamps and set fire to this place while everyone was asleep. Thank God, someone found and stopped his evil deeds in time." Klein and Leonard successively found several poor people who slept next to Souls last night and found guards to stop the tragedy, but only got an answer that was no different from the information that, of course, they secretly used second sight, divination, and other methods to confirm whether the other party was lying. It seems that Souls has long had the idea of revenge and self-destruction, a seemingly normal case. Leonard let the dean and the priest leave and expressed his opinion first. Klein said, "My divination also told me that this case was not influenced by extraordinary factors. Temporarily rule out the Souls arson case." Leonard came to the conclusion at that moment. Fry suddenly said, "No, there may be another possibility. For example, Souls was instigated by someone else. That person was extraordinary, but he didn't use extraordinary means." Klein heard Isa Bright immediately chimed in. "It is possible, for example, the instigator before Trish the instigator, but it has nothing to do with Mrs. Law's death." He thought with a slight frown.